The Board of Governors of the EBRD has elected Odile Renaud-Bassaux of France as the bank's next president, currently Director General at French Treasury. Ms. Renaud-Bassaux replaces Sir Suma Chakrabarti, who stepped down in July after serving 2 full 4-year terms. She will assume office later this year.
In the proposed 2021 state budget, the Georgian government admits that a new port tender is unlikely to succeed. This is because no credible investor is likely to participate in circumstances where arbitration claims are ongoing about the government's treatment of ADC and international investor Mr. Bob Meyer. Anaklia Development Consortium, ADC, issued a statement.
I believe that the National Bank of Georgia has acted adequately. Finance Minister Machavariani declared it as a response to a question from BMG, which concerned the interventions made by the National Bank of Georgia to maintain the stability of the national currency. Now we are hosting the IMF virtual mission, and the MBG has constant contact with them. I believe that the central bank will continue to act as adequately as it has acted earlier, Mr. Machavariani said. On the question if more intervention is needed to stabilize the national currency, Ivane Machavariani replied, "Let's leave this for the MBG to decide."
According to the Prime Minister of Georgia, the citizens' health is the most important. Today, Georgia manages the pandemic stage more effectively than others. This is not a determinant for us. We may lose the status of a green country tomorrow and regain it the next day. The most important thing for us is first, the health of citizens. Second, not to impose restrictions, which will also cause serious inconvenience and risks to the rapid recovery of the economy. And third, to complete the election process quickly and efficiently and hold the most democratic and transparent elections during the pandemic, said Georgi Gakharia after the session of the Interagency Council this week.
The Georgian government yesterday officially presented the candidacy of Zurab Pololikashvili to renew his mandate as head of the World Tourism Organization for the period 2022-2025 for his enormous contribution to the global development of tourism. Zurab Pololikashvili took office in 2017, and since then he has developed an intense activity in favor of sustainable tourism, respectful of the environment, generating wealth for the poorest, and adapted to the objectives of the 2030 agenda. This is the Checkpoints, co-authored and hosted by Elena Kvanchilashvili and myself. I'm Georgi Sakadze, and we are here to tell you all about this week and about business and economy.
Thank you for watching us every Sunday. Without you, the Checkpoints lacks, of course, value. And now to start, it's been a busy week, to be honest, and it kind of kicked off with the economic update of Georgia and the region by the World Bank.
Indeed, Elena, indeed. And let's focus on the broader picture first. According to the World Bank, emerging and developing economies in the Europe and Central Asia region are on course to contract by 4.4% this year, the worst recession since the global financial crisis of 2008. According to the World Bank, the pace of recovery depends on the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic, the availability and distribution of a vaccine, and the degree of improvement in global trade and investment. As a result, growth in the region could be weaker than expected if the pandemic worsens. At this point, growth is expected to recover in 2021 between a range of 1.1 to 3.3%. The outlook remains highly uncertain, however, and the risks are titled to the downside. We can now listen to the World Bank Regional Director for the South Caucasus, Sebastian Molineux, on what's good and bad news for the region in the recent economic update.
Now, the good news is that we expect that you will see a recovery, an economic recovery next year, somewhere between 1.1 and 3.3%. However, this outlook is highly uncertain and tilted towards the downside, if I'm honest.
As for the local picture, the World Bank says Georgia's economy is projected to contract by 6% in 2020, reflecting the strong mobility restrictions at the start of the pandemic, job losses, as well as continued restrictions on international tourism, which contributed around 8% of GDP prior to the pandemic. This is definitely the most pessimistic outlook among IFIs so far, as it seems the welfare impacts will be equally severe. As many as 160,000 Georgians could fall into poverty in 2020, and over 400,000 could suffer downward income mobility, World Bank reports. As for the growth outlook for 2021, the World Bank projects that the growth will reach 4% in 2021 as the shocks related to the pandemic dissipate and tourism recovers alongside improving consumer and business confidence. We can now listen to the World Bank Regional Director for the South Caucasus, Sebastian Molenius, again on what's good and bad news now for Georgia in the recent economic update.
Now, the good news is that the government has put in a number of sound macroeconomic policies in place, and these have allowed the government to support households, to support firms, and to make important investments into the health sector and in terms of social protection programs that have enabled essentially the government to buffer the shock somewhat. But again, there are a lot of uncertainties in this respect that we still have to monitor very carefully.
Elena, if I'm not mistaken, Georgia's economic outlook at this stage from ADB, not the World Bank, is -5% in 2020 and 4.5% in 2021.
Yes, Georgi, you're totally correct. However, as ADB country director Shane Rosenthal told the Checkpoints in what seems to be an exclusive interview, the outlook depends on the factors that on their side depend vastly on the pandemic and the way it impacts the economy. What effect has COVID-19 had on support priorities of ADB towards Georgia? We can listen to Shane Rosenthal right now. First of all, of course, we're all interested about the ADB's decision to hold its annual meeting in Georgia in 2021. Why Georgia, and what should we expect from this meeting?
This is an amazing opportunity for Georgia to host what is normally a meeting welcoming over 3,000 delegates. And I would expect that for a country like Georgia, the number would be even higher because everybody wants to come to Georgia. And it's a great chance for the country to show off its achievements, to explain and show why this is a great country to visit, why it's a leader in this part of the world in terms of the reforms it's making as an open economy, and the progress it's making in delivering benefits to its people.
And ADB's decision also rests on ADB's attitude, just the way you just summarized in a few words, right?
Absolutely. We are very positive about Georgia. It's been on a very steady and direct and purposeful, deliberate path over the last decade, and we can see this even through the difficult times like we're facing now with the COVID pandemic, and also in the good times. The ADB's been a partner to the government in responding to the economic burden that this has placed on households, on businesses, and on the banks that businesses and households depend upon.
Would you say it was a right decision to lock down economy on the early stage when we had still fewer cases?
You know, Eleni, when you look around the world at countries that succeeded early on in keeping the disease at bay, they all have something in common, and Georgia is in that club of successful countries. And they restricted entry at the border. They communicated very effectively with their people and with the private sector, and they put in place effective policies to ease the burden So that was the recipe that we saw here, and it delivered huge benefits. We saw in the international press the very, very positive experience that Georgia had. But now, of course, the country is facing what many other countries are also facing, the so-called second wave. And I think it's about a balance between opening up the economy in a responsible way and keeping the disease under control. And so far what I see is that recipe at play here in Georgia. But of course, like everyone, we're watching very closely.
Would you say that the green status of the country that we have so far was a card to play during the crisis period, or is it a card to play in post-crisis period? What is your take on that?
What do you mean? The success that the country has had to take advantage of that now or later?
Yes, now or later, because that was something that the government was saying at the early stage of the pandemic, that this green status of the country would give us the right to open up sooner to the rest of the world and rebound the tourism, which is the hardest hit globally and in Georgia as well, since Georgia's GDP is so dependent on tourism sector.
Look, it's true. There would be great difficulty in recovering if proper policies had not been put in place this year to keep things under control. But now, as the situation advances, I'm not sure that it is a binary choice like that. We still have a card to play next year. Everyone is hoping that the tourism season will be open the middle of next year. And if Georgia maintains its strong reputation as a country that succeeded through this crisis, I think it will also build on its already strong reputation as a great place to visit.
Yeah,
so let's do going together.
Yeah, I'm asking this question because looking at different outlooks from different IFIs and our partner organizations like EBRD, like ADB, the recovery trend, so to say, the growth numbers for 2021 show that the growth will be slower than expected at the early stage of pandemic. So the V-shaped recovery that we all thought would take place is slowly not that clear case anymore for Georgia and for the rest of the world.
And certainly, no one has a crystal ball. This is a hopefully once in a century, no more kind of pandemic. So there's not necessarily a clear playbook. So by nature, there is a degree of uncertainty. But from what we see around the world and what we see here in Georgia, we are confident that the country is well placed to come back strong next year once the world is ready, because there are parts of this crisis that Georgia can control and other parts that are out of its control. What Georgia needs to do is maintain its positioning as a safe, good place to visit, a good place to invest in, and a good place to live. And I think it's succeeding in doing that. We're optimistic. We're continuing to partner with the government. We have a very strong program this year, 5 programs in all with the government, including some initial response back in May to help the government with its program to support households and businesses. We just approved on Wednesday a $150 million sector development program to improve
water supply and sanitation services in Georgia.
That's right. So that's going to bring $30 million of investment, much of it in Tel Aviv, where the water mains and the water distribution system and some reservoirs and other infrastructure are going to be upgraded, but also to help with operation and maintenance equipment across more than 50 other towns and cities. But importantly, this program focuses not just on the investment side, but also on the operations side, the management side, helping the United Water Company, which is one of the largest water utilities in the country, and of course it is a state-owned utility, helping it improve its corporate governance, putting in place a change management process to improve efficiency, bringing more females into the supervisory and management positions, and saving costs and preparing it for some options in future where the private sector could play a greater role and bring even gains.
Were there some corrections that COVID-19 brought to the table in regards to the funding priorities or support priorities for Georgia?
So I've talked about the water program and the response to COVID, and of course that's an example of something we did not expect to have this year, and that was the first program that we approved back in May. But we're also working toward a new program to support vocational skills development in Georgia. Very, very important to enable companies to be able to access the skills that they need to do business better here in Georgia. We're also working on a program to help the government with the reforms it's making in the electricity sector to improve the way the transmission company is operating. More efficiency, more reliability in the end for customers, for businesses here. And already we're working on a new program next year that would be supporting irrigation and agriculture. We think that this COVID pandemic and the impact on the economy has underscored the need for greater resilience, greater diversification in the economy. You know, almost 50% of the population works in agriculture, but it's a sector that's only contributing about 10% of GDP, and we see huge potential.
At this point, Georgia's economic outlook from ADB is minus 5% in 2020, and to economic growth to 4.5% in 2021. Do you think ADB will have to revise its outlook?
Those figures are more or less aligned with the government's outlook and with the outlook of the International Monetary Fund. There's really a consensus as to how deep the crisis is affecting the economy this year and what the potential is next year to come out of it in what you described as that V-shaped recovery. But these are projections that do get updated a couple of times a year in the case of ADB. So we revisit them, we monitor the situation, and of course updates are always possible. But as I said earlier, we're optimistic about the position that Georgia has put itself in to be able to come out of this crisis when the circumstances are right next year.
And my last question, and very interested what your advice would be, because in this period of pandemic we see how volatile lari is, and also we see, as I already mentioned, from different outlooks both globally and locally, that even 2021 might not be as fast growing from the economy's side. What is your take? How should Georgia manage its debt?
Look, as you've seen this year, there was downward pressure with the crisis, but the central bank managed the situation very well. It's been a very smooth adjustment to the exchange rate. The fundamental position of the central bank is very strong. The macroeconomic management of the government during the crisis is considered to be very solid. So there's a lot of confidence in this economy. And sure, there may be pressures, there may be changes, including on the currency, but every country is dealing with this. And Georgia has shown that it is capable of handling it as well as any other country.
Well, thank you so much for this positive and optimistic interview. We much need it from ADB in these tough times. Thank you so much for taking our questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, Elena, we made a very good and comprehensive preface to the interview with Natia Turnava, Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia. It seems we are in the cycle of having high-ranking officials talking to the checkpoints almost every week, crossing fingers. I have to say that Mrs. Minister answered all our questions about the present and future of the Georgian economy in the context of both challenges and opportunities as viewed by the government of Georgia during the pandemic and in the post-pandemic period. I won't be talking much. And on to Natia Turnava, who sat down for an extended interview with the checkpoints. Many thanks for your time and for being with us. We would really like to update the current situation. Where do we stand for now? We are on our way of elections. It's still ongoing COVID situation, quite tough, and also quite difficulties within the regional. I'm talking about Karabakh problem, and so quite difficult period. So could you be so kind to update us in this regard?
So first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this program. It's a relatively new program. It's my first time here. I would
Pleasure is ours. Thank you so much.
Yes, I would like to wish you health, of course. Health, it's the most topical thing today, but also success and many, many interesting guests.
Likewise, Madam Minister, thank you.
Coming back to your question, yes, indeed, the year of 2020, it's quite challenging period of time. And not only for Georgia, but for the whole globe. Georgia is a small country with an open economy, well integrated into region and well integrated into world economy. So of course we are the subject of this big hit. We're also experiencing the same challenges as the whole world. It's a great level of uncertainty still because no one knows how long it will take to overcome the problem of pandemic, also considering the regional escalation of the frozen conflicts. However, the good thing is that Georgia has a, I would say, great margin of safety. And Georgia had a, let's say, gained a lot of reserves during previous years. I mean, the high economic growth, you know, that year of 2019 was quite successful in these terms. The economic growth amounted to 5.1%, was higher than it was predicted before.
The beginning of this year was also very prominent.
Exactly, it gave very positive trajectory, it gave very positive inertia to our economy, and the beginning of the year was quite let's say positive, and it also gave us a kind of margin of safety for the next months, where a state of emergency was announced and total or partial lockdown was implemented in order to curb the spread of the virus. Right. That's why we can say that after May, since May of this year, we are observing a moderate but steady positive trend of recovery, quite swift recovery that already has been started. So
taking into consideration the existing COVID situation, which was a bit predictable due to the case-by-case or step-by-step, as you mentioned, opening of the economy and generally, right. Could you wonder that we could have rather rapid or more quick or effective recovery? How well satisfied you are with the trend of recovery?
Trend is even better than we expected, as I already mentioned. And so if just to analyze the figures of GDP drop, of course it's a drop. Please. It's a drop. We cannot be, let's say, different from the rest of the world. Expected minus 4.5 or minus 5, if speaking about annual figures. However, starting from May, we see that this drop in GDP is reducing. This negative trend is reducing. You could remember that in May it was 2-digit, then it was minus 7.7, then minus 5.5, now in August minus 5.3, so again it's diminishing. The trend is reducing. It means that we are experiencing so-called V-shape recovery. V-shape sharp recovery, and it gives us a good level of confidence that year 2021 will be very positive, +5 in terms of growth of GDP. Of course, it means that we lost 1 year, but I think that it's the situation is much better than much better than in the region.
Together with your colleagues, you did a job in regards of IFIs to resecure the current 2020 and the upcoming year financial funds, let me say so. Quite huge financial reserves has been allocated. It's more or less reserved. My question is, how satisfied personally you are with measures taken as a stimulus package for the economy, which was concentrated to various industry and generally to the economy?
I would like to agree with you that securing international financing in the beginning of this challenge, in the beginning of the pandemic crisis, was very important for us because
very strong signal.
Absolutely, it was very strong signal to the business community that government has not only very clear plan how to overcome the challenge and how to help the affected industries, but also government has sufficient sources due to the very strong support of our partners, of international financial institutions, due to the confidence that government will provide the gradual reforms despite the virus, and so they see that we are committed towards reforms. That's why they helped us very timely. As for the future incentives for the business, first of all, let me remind you that the, let's say, first half of the year we could not stimulate business activities because the whole idea behind securing and preventing widespread of the virus was lockdown period.
Talking about the existing
absolutely,
lockdown,
that was the major target of our anti-crisis measure, to lock down, but despite that to secure the, let's say,
separate
industries, to keep them alive, to keep them well prepared for locking out. And we managed to overcome that and to pass this period quite successfully. Then now, of course, our major goal is to be concentrated more on the stimulation, on the encouraging businesses and new investments. I would like to say that when we are speaking about this swift recovery and V-shaped recovery, it is not reflected only in the figures of GDP growth or less drop. And we can observe the positive trends within the businesses, within the sectors of business activities. For example, coming back to our quite effective program, Enterprise Georgia. You know that Enterprise Georgia became one of the very important central, I would say, tool of business support during COVID and probably in the nearest years as well. And it's a kind of mirror for us when we are observing how business is doing during this challenging period of time. I can tell you that the interest from the banks, interest from the industries, from the small and medium-sized enterprises is huge. We have about 100 cases of applications and projects in a credit guarantee scheme. Yes, and 2/3 of them are related to the new development, new project, new pipeline. Also, very high interest towards the so-called industrial component, where we are subsidizing the bank interest rate as well. And what is also interesting, that banks are not rejecting and quite interested again in the projects related to the touristic industry. They show moderate optimism. It means that they see that touristic industry also survived and there is a potential of development. They are still financing new development in hotel industries, in restaurants, in HoReCa sector.
You had another conference call with them. You just reported, just after the governmental session, that you requested about some additional support coming from the commercial banks. However, they could additionally assist the tourism industry, which is still facing quite huge problems. My first question is, what was the response of the commercial banks? We are talking about wise commercial institutions, and I'm not sure that it's a part of philanthropy, what they decided and how they reflected.
No, not at all when it comes to the banks. Of course, they are very pragmatic.
Yeah, and what is the price of your latest conversation and pre-agreement where banks intend to further support tourism industry?
We see that to travel, to visit other countries, to become a tourist, it's already became a primary need for the worldwide population, for international visitors. We can see that even during COVID pandemic, people are still traveling, and it's an essential core need, and that's why banks are also optimistic, and all of us understand that we have to support this industry a bit for the next months, because it's still a challenge, and we have a quite big uncertainty regarding the timing of, let's say, vaccine, when vaccine will come, and etc. So in that case, we need somehow to help the industry to stay alive, let's say, to stay resilient, to keep employment, to address some shortcomings in liquidity during next months. And I got
see banks as a
yes, I got a
partners in
positive. I got a positive response feedback from the banks. They are ready to provide additional restructuring of their loans in case if the hotels, especially small family hotels, will address them. I would like to go beyond the touristic industry. Yes, of course, it's important. It's a problem. It generates a lot of employment. It contributes more than 12% in GDP, the most affected one. But this is not the only industry which can become a driver of our reshape in future. Because in 2021, touristic industry still will be a subject of support, I guess. But when it comes to other fields of economy, like development, where we also addressed a lot of support, agriculture, manufacturing, processing, manufacturing industry. And now we see that this one-time support already worked.
My pre-final question in regards of tourism is quite simple. How did we manage to meet, all the expectations what the industry had? Because still I have a feeling that during the summer, industry and the population had a feeling that something was reopening totally. And tourism would definitely come. Be honest, I don't know why do they have these expectations, but I know one thing, that we could definitely deliver more proper message in this regards.
Our communication during all these difficult days was quite clear, quite effective, and the message was also quite clear. We never communicated in a way that since June or July everything will be totally open, because it was impossible. And we always are saying, and it was our previous message as well, that we will open only so-called green corridors. Mm-hmm. And that happened actually. We have identified these 5 countries with a multiple purpose, not only being, let's say, green country-to-country corridor, but also to serve as a hub for transit of passengers, and especially Georgian citizens to Georgia. Also, we are open to other visitors as well, but with some particular safety measures, like quarantine, which is now shorter than before, with a more increased capacity of testing. So we are now switched to the process of adaptation. When it comes to adaptation, it means that we will gradually continue the opening of our borders, continue the opening for the flights. You know that open sky policy, this is our trademark, because we did a lot to bring here big air carriers, low costers as well, which is so important for our population, for bringing here different type of tourists. However, in future we see the niche and market niche for our local tourism as a destination for high spenders. So here, absolutely, because we already reached quite impressive quantitative targets. So last year we served 3 times greater number of international visitors than our own population is. 9.4 million. And now we should be more concentrated on the qualitative side of the tourism. So there should be tourists and international visitors from quite distant countries, high spenders, who will spend here longer, and let's say provide more contribution to the Georgian economy. Another direction where we see more and more international visitors will come. This is a synergy between investments and tourism. You know that we announced several interesting initiatives, including work remotely from Georgia, the special platform where we are inviting different, let's say, kind of freelancers, people who are working distantly thanks to COVID. Now it's more, let's say, welcome and widespread practice to work from Georgia, to stay and to live in Georgia. Why? Because Georgia is a safe, Georgia is a joyful place to stay, Georgia is an affordable place to stay.
My last question is in regards of additional stimulus, what you have mentioned. Can we just confirm that there will be some additional stimulus generally to the business?
It's inevitable that we should implement additional supporting policies. It might be new programs within Enterprise Georgia, because it's proved to be quite efficient tool in order to share the risks, to share the costs, to at least, let's say, demonstrate the commitment of the government toward these or those fields. It might be also continuation and speeding of the process of structural reforms. For example, VAT return reform, which is also a very good boost for the business, or many other directions. We are working very hardly in order to make Georgia even more attractive place than it was before, because after COVID, in post-COVID era, the competition for the foreign direct investments and each US dollar and each euro will be sharper, and we are well prepared, and we are starting earlier than others.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
for the interview.
Speaking of high-ranking guests in the checkpoints, Georgi, keeping fingers crossed, let's now dig deeper into the risks associated with the financial stability due to the pandemic shocks on the economy. Vice Governor of the National Bank of Georgia, Papuna Lejava, also sat down with the checkpoints this week. With him, we will be focusing on 4 main risks to financial stability as identified by the NBG. These are uncertainty associated with the duration and economic impact of COVID-19 pandemic, increase in country risk premium and its repercussions on exchange rate and foreign currency debt burden, more than anticipated adverse impact of the weaker external demand and the virus containment measures on tourism and its adjacent industries, and finally, drop in real estate prices due to weak demand and its adverse impact on the financial sector. I won't talk much to Georgi. Papuna Lejava will explain more for our viewers. The first risk that is mentioned, these are the risks associated with the length of the pandemic and how it is really tough to predict how long COVID-19 will take, and also impact of it on the economy. Why is it a risk? And this question rises because we see that the government has a firm position that further lockdowns are no more issue.
Thank you, Elena. Great question, and thank you for covering this report. Let me summarize the key messages from the report. First, how we approach this crisis. The financial sector and the banking sector was much better prepared for this crisis than for the previous crisis. Second, of course, the impact of the crisis is quite severe on the economy and also on the financial system. But regardless, the third key message is that financial sector is quite well prepared, and it is well positioned to withstand this crisis without significant challenges. Now, to come back to the key risks, as you rightly mentioned, the first risk is the duration of the pandemic and its impact on the economy. Of course, this all depends on the adoption of vaccine. There is a lot of uncertainty around this question. In our base case scenario, we expect the vaccine to be adopted in the first half of 2021, but in an off chance that this process is delayed, the 2021 will also be a difficult year for the world, but also for Georgia as a small open economy.
Also, there is increase in risk premium and also the negative impact on exchange rate and also the debt. Is it what we are looking at the situation right now? And also, I remember when Mr. Gwenetadze himself, head of NB, president of the NBG, said that there is this kind of dilemma when when on the one hand, of course, all these support packages have this impact on lari exchange rate, but also it is very necessary to support the vulnerable groups, especially during COVID-19 period. Do you have enough instruments to kind of try to monitor this process and manage this process?
So far, what we are seeing, the risk premiums have not increased for Georgia materially. But if this is the case, this may withdraw the capital from the country and may impact the foreign exchange rates. The dollarization of Georgian financial sector is quite high, which means that the borrowers are borrowing in foreign currency. Of course, if lari depreciates further, this will impact the credit worthiness of these borrowers. On the other hand, today the National Bank of Georgia is well prepared. Our reserves are at adequate level, and we are spending, and we will continue spending foreign currency to support local economy with more liquidity in foreign currency.
The next risk is a decrease in external demand and also some kind of lockdown perspective, so to say, and the impact on tourism and of course other sectors that are also connected with tourism. What do you mean under more than expected tougher negative impact, and what are some of the factors that may be playing?
Yes, so this risk primarily assumes further travel restrictions. Georgia was highly dependent on tourism in 2019 and previous
and service sector
years.
in general.
Of course, related service sectors are also impacted, and we have high employment in these service sectors. If there are further travel restrictions and tourism inflows reduced, this will have impact not only on current account deficit, but it will also impact the employment in the country. Both will have impact on the financial sector.
And the final risk that is identified in this document is price decreases in real estate due to the weak demand and the negative impact it might have on the financial sector. What is the correlation here, and how does demand in real estate correlate with the financial stability?
In this case, it is important to draw a parallel to the previous crisis, where we entered the crisis with a price bubble. So in 2008-9 there was
financial crisis.
Yes, so when the financial crisis started, there was a real estate price bubble, not only in Georgia but across the world. This time, this is not the case. So even though we had high growth in this sector, mortgages were growing well. The prices of the real estate was not significantly increased. This means that we don't expect as severe shock on the prices of real estate as there was in 2008-9. Though if there is a shock on real estate prices, the channels how it affects the financial sector is double. First, of course, the direct exposure to the sector is high of the financial sector, so they're funding the real estate projects. But in other sectors, a lot of the collateral is provided with the real estate, and of course, if the prices of real estate will drop, this will impact the credit quality of other loans as well.
Now we see in this COVID-19 period that government is trying to support this sector as well, and mainly this is the well-known subsidy program. So how does that impact the risk itself?
Currently, of the mortgages disbursed, about 35% is attributed to this program. So 35% of mortgages are disbursed through interest rate subsidy program. We expect that over time, the natural level of demand should increase, and the impact of the subsidies should decrease, and these two factors should balance each other in the medium term. You mentioned the key phrase, we expect. So what are some of the scenarios that are associated with the risks that we have been mentioning above, and where do you put on this scenario map Georgia at this moment? We expect, in all these cases, we expect broadly three types of scenarios. First is a base case scenario, then we have risk scenario and we have severe risk scenario. In the base case scenario, we expect 5% reduction of GDP in 2020 and then 5% recovery in 2021. And of course, this macro assumption is accompanied by assumptions on other factors such as real estate prices, exchange rate, interest rate, and so on. In the in the risk scenario, we expect the pandemic impact to be longer and vaccine to be adopted in the second half of 2021. In this case, the recovery process will be much slower and also the impact of 2020 growth will be stronger. We expect the GDP reduction of 7% in this scenario in 2020 and 2.5% growth in 2021.
So the pace of the growth is also slowed.
Yes, pace of the growth is also slow. And in in the most severe scenario, we expect not only the timing of the vaccine to be longer, but also the impact of the crisis to be stronger throughout this period. And in this scenario, the GDP decline will be 9% in 2020, and we will only have 1.5% recovery in 2021.
Let us hope that the severe scenario won't take place. Thank you so much for being with us and taking our questions.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, after providing the whole picture from both economic and financial analysis from the top decision makers in the spheres, now let's focus on the aspect that the Minister of the Economy also touched upon briefly in the interview with us. And this is a fact that the three location consultants are visiting. The three location consultants are visiting as representatives of major transnational investment agencies, so Location Perspectives and Angelo Economics, due to the support from the USAID Economic Security Program.
Yes, Georgi, they have decades of experience in working on investment projects with international companies and public institutions. I'm more than glad to announce that our reporter, Anna Tavadze, will be debuting now. She managed to bring together everything we know of the program so far in a short video story for our viewers.
From October 6 to 8, location investment consultants from Belgium and the US visited Georgia for the second time with the support of the USAID Economic Security Program. The visit was organized by Enterprise Georgia. The consultants met up with the Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development, Natia Turnava, who says that close communications were held with the investment location consultants about Georgia's investment potential. In the context of the global pandemic, we are working hard to attract foreign investment because despite the global crisis, Georgia is one of the most attractive platforms for foreign investors. In international rankings, Georgia leads in many positions as a safe business environment country. These people get to know Georgia and then advise their clients, successful companies worldwide, that if these companies are thinking of relocating their production or business to another country, Georgia is one of the most attractive locations.
I'm very excited. I'd like to see what this country will look like 5 years from now. And I've seen this stuff all around the world, also in this region, and I'm quite optimistic that Georgia will succeed. And if we can help and be part of that story, it will be my pleasure. So
I think your country has a lot of possibilities to attracting foreign investment in key sectors that will propel, I think, Georgians to long-term prosperity and sustainable economic development. You are the stable, pro-Western oriented country that can attract foreign investment, not only for Georgia, but export-oriented businesses to serve regional countries as well.
This is the second tour of Georgia held for Belgian and American location consultants. These are huge international companies that advise the largest companies in the world where to invest. About 58 companies are members of the Site Selectors Guild. We have already managed to bring managing partners of 7 member companies of the Site Selectors Guild. When these people return to their other countries. They will share information with their colleagues about Georgia's investment advantages. This is an additional tool that will allow us to inform more investor companies about our country during the pandemic. It's definitely time for the ambassadorial in the checkpoint, since ambassadors partially play the same role on way or the other. Tamta Dzidjavadze interviewed Ambassador of the Czech Republic to Georgia, Mr. Petr Mikyska, I think I'm right, focusing on the very important and relevant issues like interests of Czech investors in Georgia and recommendations on how to resist COVID-19 more effectively.
Also, Georgi, it will be very interesting to hear what the Czech ambassador has to say on the green status of Georgia, since yesterday, and our viewers can go to bm.g for the news in English to see that Germany has added whole Georgia, and not any specific region, but the whole Georgia, to the coronavirus risk list.
Well, we'll find out more, and we'll find out just in a moment. Here is the interview with His Excellency Petr Mikyska.
How do you think how Georgia is handling this crisis in terms of both health and also economy?
The COVID situation is obviously very difficult, but the way how the government of Georgia and the population of Georgia tackled this pandemic is a reason for admiration of all, both other countries and WHO and all the factors, all the actors. So this is admiration. But everything has two sides. So the restrictive measures effectively worked, effectively tackled the spread of pandemics, but the cost is really high, the economic cost. And the way how the government is handling it so far is mainly relying on external factors, being it grants or loans. And it can be potentially dangerous in the future, because we have to see how sustainable it is, what the development of the pandemic will be, how long it will be, and how the external world will react also, and what opportunities and also responsibilities it will bring. So in this sense, it's possibly dangerous. So of course we have certain recommendations for the government in this sense also.
Could you please tell us some recommendations?
Well, it's to spend wisely those means coming from abroad, being it both loans and grants. To spend it on key factors, key sectors, rather speaking, and to invest it in the future development, not just in daily operations.
So, do you think that our country is still green country, where with whom other countries should open their borders?
Well, the situation is changing, if not every day, so every week. And formerly green countries are right now, like Czechia, for example. We were long-time champions in European Union, and now we are, if not the worst, so the second worst country in European Union. And so it changes. But Georgia is stable. Georgia is green. Georgia is eligible for, if not all, so majority countries. And in the terms of the other movement of foreigners to Georgia, this is a very delicate question. Because, well, any influx of foreign citizens to Georgia means a quite high risk for the population. And again, it's an enormous task for the government to balance the economic income, the economic opportunities that foreign citizens bring to Georgia, and the risk those citizens potentially can bring to Georgian population. I think that the Georgian government is balancing and assessing the situation quite well. So I hope that it will continue, and that both the government and the population will understand this.
So how do you think, what are those main sectors that are interesting for Czech investors in Georgia?
We already mentioned the energy sector, which is the main one, of course. Then the transportation sector. Well, we are participating in many tenders. We are participating in Tbilisi underground reconstruction, modernization. We are participating in tenders for public transport, etc., etc. Škoda cars are seen on the streets of Tbilisi and other cities. We have, well, in terms of energy sector, it's very, very interesting that the major oil extraction company in Georgia is Czech. It's a daughter company of Czech Moravian oil wells company, and it's operating with its daughter company KBOC, Kura Basin Operation Corporation, here in Georgia, as well as construction. Construction is a sector where Czech company Kopos is participating with their materials, and the tourism. The tourism, as I said, well, the project is in the pipeline, it's under development, but there are more projects, you know, not so big, smaller, small hotels or apartments construction for tourists. So this is one of, well, those are main sectors for our cooperation.
How would you assess Georgian business environment from 10 points? Let's say that 10 is the maximum.
This is a very difficult question.
Yeah, I know.
First of all, one should be polite to the country. Second, one should be reasonable and objective. Third, the situation is changing with the external factors like COVID also, and internal factors like election period, for example. We should take into account the process of setting up the business here, but also the operations here. So without more explanation, you know, 6 out of 10, because there is always a room for improvement, but at the same time it's, I think, quite a good note, 6, because maybe it's reflecting also the easiness of setting up the business here, but also sometimes hard days of operation. So 6.
So what experiences Georgia can take from Czech Republic? We don't have automotive industry like developed, but what can we develop? How do you think?
We have a whole program of support of transformation. We call it Transformation Transition Program, which is a support to transformation, because we have this experience and we have the experience of support of developed democracies, developed economies. And well, this is the field where we would like to support Georgia also, to provide Georgian government and Georgian population with our experience, which can be both positive and negative. So we are openly saying, okay, with certain sectors of our economy, we failed. So don't go this way, don't repeat the same mistake, the same failure. But we have other sectors where we were successful, and we can transfer this experience. And we can also transfer our experience with accessing European Union, because part of our current success, economic success, and our democratic development, political development, is also due to our accession and membership in the European Union. Because, well, with this accession and this membership, we received many responsibilities and many opportunities. We received the open market. Nowadays, 80% of Czech exports go to the European Union markets. And we received some obligations, some responsibilities. And those responsibilities are mainly in the institutional setup and the regulation. New norms, new standards, which are aimed at something, and the history proved that this goal is successful. This is very advantageous, so let's go this way. And we have this experience. We can provide the information, provide our experience to the government with setting up technical norms and standards, for example, with how working with European funds also, which is very important. You have to know how to ask for the money to be supported in your development. And well, we would like to support the development of the institutions, because institutions are everything in democratic country. It makes the country less vulnerable and less affected by political turmoils, changes of the government, because if you have a strong institution, the country runs on its own.
And we continue with our permanent rubrics. Khan Academy is one of the first non-formal educational platforms in Georgia, which has brought Western standards in the field of education and started working with adults to expand their thinking system, increase emotional intelligence, mental transformation, and development of modern communication techniques. The general aim of the Academy is to enrich the emotional intelligence of young people and to improve critical thinking in them. This is a short, brief description. The rest will be told by Marehi Kwaramadze, a member of the Forbes Georgia 30 Under 30 list and founder of the Khan Academy.
Education is the most powerful weapon to change the world, and yes, I think that the world is as important as never before. I think that Khan Academy and other educational institutions in Georgia and in the world plays a crucial role in the development of human or society. Khan Academy is a leading non-formal educational platform in Georgia, which is based on lifelong learning methods and the concepts who aims at acquiring young leaders and children with soft skills, with knowledge and experience to adapt in new world in COVID era as well. The mission of Khan Academy is to go beyond the boundaries of knowledge and education and build like a civil responsibility and the future leaders who will play a crucial role for the community or country and the world. That's why I think that Khan Academy and other non-formal or formal education institutions in Georgia, in developing countries and in developed countries as well, plays a crucial role in human and society development. I think that Khan Academy created a crucial experience in non-formal education, and I think this is a time in COVID era for everyone to reimagine and renew like an educational system and the systems we were living in together. We also stopped regional development not only in Georgia but in the regional countries in Armenia and Azerbaijan, and of course the demand of our programs and services in non-formal education has been decreased and up to 60%, which influenced on us significantly. But we started cooperation with UN agencies and started implementation two very important programs. The first one with UNICEF Georgia, which unifying up to 1,500 high school students all over Georgia, and the second project with UN representative in Georgia, UN 75 survey and dialogues, which aims at involving young generation and the people in a dialogue and unify them under the question, how can we create a better future by 2045. And I'm very proud that Khan Academy is the official partner of the program in Georgia.
And we continue to bring voices of politicians who run for the parliamentary elections closer to you, as promised.
This time Zurab Japaridze from Girchim political party faces our questions on the vision of how to develop the economy and make the business environment truly investor-friendly.
Zurab Japaridze from Girchim.
You do not have a traditional written, so to say, program. Why?
Well, that was a kind of a strategic decision not to have a detailed program for these elections, because Girchi is not trying to win elections now. So we don't lie to our voters. We don't say to them that we're going to win the elections and we're going to form the government and then we will do this and that. And because of that, we don't have some details and numbers in our program. What we tell to our voters is that we might be part of the coalition government if the opposition wins at the end of the day. And then what we will try is we will try to push our ideas forward as far as possible. And because of that, we initiated a special process with the basically all the main opposition parties and try to find some kind of overlaps with them. And we actually achieved some success in that respect. We signed 3 documents. This is like a visions about how we want to change judiciary, how we want to change economy, how we want to change education system.
What is the logic behind choosing these 3 spheres?
So we believe in private property. So without having a proper judiciary or proper court system, you cannot have private property respected in the country. So we started with the judiciary first, then we moved to economy, and in economy we agreed that we want to reduce the government expenditure 20% in upcoming 4 years. We agreed that we want basically all these assets, these are lands, forests, like state-owned companies, all this to be owned by private citizens, by us, by citizens of this country. Our vision is that lari should be in competition with any other currency, so we should have a multi-currency regime in the country, but we could not agree on that with other parties, so we just had a general statement that we need to come up in 100 days, we need to come up with some kind of solution for lari stabilization. And then we moved to education, and in education the main problem we see is that it's basically owned by the state and controlled and regulated fully by the state. So we agreed that private education institutions will be out of the state regulation, and then state institutions will have like more autonomy from the Ministry of Education. Now we have these 3 agreements, and we can actually tell our voters now in next parliament, if the opposition parties win and if there is no mess and we actually manage to form the coalition for the majority in the parliament and then form the coalition government, okay, these are the topics that is feasible that we can actually implement. So this is why we did not have the specific detailed program.
Yeah. What is in your vision for business community in Georgia?
I mean, we are for lower taxes. It's good for business. We are for free trade with any countries. It's good for business. We are for less regulations. We actually hate regulations, so we are on the side of the businesses on that. The problem we have in Georgia is lots of businesses in Georgia that are called businesses. They are actually affiliated businesses, if one may say so. So they exist as a business because they have some advantages coming from budget or from different types of regulations. Because using regulations they get rid of other like small competitors. So I think I'm not promising to businesses that I will be lobbying for some crony stuff, but what I can promise to any business in Georgia or any businessman is that I will be doing what I've been doing for years now, for educating for lower taxes, less regulations, small government, fewer or smaller involvement of government and state in business affairs.
More economic freedom.
More freedom in general. Yeah.
In this COVID-19 context especially, why didn't you, and considering that Georgia is a relatively poor country, why didn't you focus on healthcare system, on pension system, when we see that this is the sphere where fundamental changes have taken place?
The main problem I think there is that people still perceive this reform as a good thing. The opposition parties basically hesitate to criticize the system, even now. So because of that, it's not easy to talk with them and to actually get an agreement on how we want to reform it, because if you want to reform the system, you have to criticize it. So because of that, we have not talked about healthcare or about social assistance system at all, and most probably if opposition wins, we will have to spend lots of time talking about all these topics once we are in the parliament.
Yeah. So, who is your electorate looking at Girchi as an independent player or Girchi as a team player?
I think both. Because of the two reasons. One is because we've been involved in this process of negotiating with opposition parties and trying to achieve some agreement on different important topics, and because of the fact that it's now quite clear that Girchi is a real party and we will not disappear and we will actually become a parliamentary party pretty soon, people started to look at us as like a more serious party. And when they look at us, they actually listen to you. And before that, they did not actually listen to us. I mean, they had some stereotypes in their mind that like we are all like drug users, we are all against Georgia's defense and things like that. But now they actually listen.
So, what will be the fundamental change that Girchi will bring to the table?
I think we've already changed the political landscape in Georgia. We are the only party that has a clear political ideology and principles and values, and no other party has that. And we are trying to be always as truthful as possible. And telling the truth is in deficit in this country, not only in politics in general, but in politics especially. So I think we already changed this political landscape, and other parties actually have to say the truth, because truth is a powerful weapon. So.
Let's see if it's worth the game. Thank you for taking our questions. Thank you again for watching, and follow us on our platforms bm.g and forbes.g. Your feedback counts.
Yes, and we will be leaving you off with a short teaser of what to anticipate in Forbes Georgia's English edition, which will be out in a few days. And see you next Sunday, of course, in the checkpoints.
Globally acclaimed and captivating, when and why did Tonino Lamborghini extend its world to Georgia? In this month's cover story of Forbes Georgia's English edition, CEO Zviad Skhuitaridze unpacks the birth of the luxurious brands project in Georgia. How do big techs make their billions? Leaderboards in this month's issue will guide the readers into in-depth insights of the world's major digital brands. He's known for being a serial entrepreneur and the investor. Why is the founder of Giber holding company, Dominic Romano, motivated to grow his portfolio in the country? Find out in the Forbes Georgia's new English edition. Meet the digital transformation pioneers, people responsible for tech support of Georgian companies for over 25 years. Orient Logic's Levan Akhlediani and Georgi Tuskia speak about the impact of pandemic on the technology sector and the company's plans for the future. 2.5 million customers and 7,500 employees. How did the pandemic change the Bank of Georgia? Head of Corporate Banking Zurab Kokosadze and Head of SME Business Banking Zurab Masurashvili have the answer. Can green finance support Georgia's economic recovery? Asian Development Bank's investment specialist unpacks the one silver lining coronavirus pandemic might offer after all. Forbes Georgia's latest English edition invites Ambassador Giror to analyze the underpinnings of making peace and winning the war against coronavirus. On many more economy and business affairs in the country and abroad, read October's English edition of the most influential magazine in the country, Forbes Georgia.